Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Debbie Alamru. I'm the Director of Communications at Amplify Africa. I'm also a writer, a poet, and a spoken word artist. Welcome to the Media in Africa panel. So the purpose of this panel is to dig a little deeper into what it takes to create impactful, viral marketing campaigns, and also to break down the meaning of diversity while examining some challenges associated with being a content creator. So I am joined by an incredible group of panelists who represent all over the continent. So we have from East Africa to West Africa. We'll have South Africa joining us shortly. So I want to begin by having everyone briefly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about how you got your start in the media world. So Jackie, if you want to start us off.
Let me unmute. Hi guys, so I'm Jackie Aina. I'm a Nigerian American, one African American parent, one parent from Nigeria. So I represent a little bit of, cultural complexities amongst Black culture. But I started on YouTube. That was my first ever real foot in the door in social media. 11 years ago, 2009 was when I uploaded my first ever video. And honestly, I just got really tired of having to search for things that said for Black or for dark skin. So, and at the time when I started my channel, I was a professional makeup artist. And I came across a lot of really troubling encounters, when it would come to shopping for makeup or buying makeup. I was so used to hearing oh, that's not gonna look good on your skin tone, or oh, you can't do that for your skin tone. So I just was well, this is annoying. I'm just gonna start showing people it's actually possible. And so that's how my empire began, I guess you could say.
I love that. Come on, empire. Kudzi.
Hi, everyone. Kudzi. I was born in Zimbabwe, actually, then grew up in South Africa and moved to the US. So Southern Africa is home. I see some people in the chat from home. And I lead the creator community team at TikTok, so the short form video app. And my start is weird how I found my way. I actually was an accountant in my former life, and then I transitioned to management consulting, and then ended up going to business school to get my MBA when I worked at Hulu for a little bit, and then ended up at an app called Musical.ly, which has now become TikTok. And I think, what I'm really focused on is ushering in new talent and new faces into the entertainment industry. So I spend a lot of my time kind of nurturing talent, as well as working with a lot of, popular people. Even spoke to Jackie recently about her TikTok account. But it's also about how do you help the next generation, whether they be from the continent, whether they be different races, different sexual orientations. That's where I spend most of my time doing.
Awesome, thank you. Go next.
Hey guys, so I am Nigerian American. Both of my parents are from Nigeria, Imo State, and Aba. I got started in media almost on accident. I guess I never thought that I would be in media. Wait, that's not my name, Nwandu. My name is Nwandu. I never thought I would be in media, but I think one day I was, trying to figure out my life, and I started an Instagram account. And 2 weeks later, it became, it started to go viral, and that account now is the Shade Room. And so that's kind of how I got started in the media game.
That's awesome. Elosi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Elosi Ikharo. I'm currently the founder of Jade Media. I got my start in media through a couple different instances. I was actually supposed to go to law school, so I was working within the legal affairs department at Fox, but knew I wanted to stay within entertainment, worked at a label, then eventually spent some time working at Essence Magazine, then working at Timing Corporate, who owned Essence at the time. Then eventually moved over to Mike, the news site, for Gen Z and millennials, and was their head of marketing and head of their branded content for some time. And then most recently, I was the head of marketing and promotions for Afropunk. So kind of bounced all over, did some time as a music editor, did some time in digital marketing, did some time in sales planning. So been a bit all over. So very excited to join this panel.
I love that. And last but definitely not least, Rekik.
Hey everyone, my name is Rekik. I'm Ethiopian American. Both my parents are from Ethiopia. So I got my start on Tumblr when I was 13, just making fun content on there with no real reason. But you know, things just pop off here and there. So that's really how I grew my social following and just like kind of let it transition into other social platforms. But I also work as a content creator for a marketing company called Tiny Horse, and I've been with them since, ooh, how long has it been? No, it's about like 7 years now. I've worked with them, and what I do with them is run social accounts for TV shows or events that we are just handling the whole social aspect or digital aspect of. So that's also what I do.
Perfect. Now, welcome, Nomzamo. We were just starting off, so we're very happy to have you. We're just looking for an introduction and basically a brief summary of how you got your start in the world of media.
I see. Wow. Well, that's a big way of coming in. Hi, everybody. And to everyone who's watching, thank you so much, first of all, for joining the session. But by way of introduction, my name is Nomzamo. I grew up in South Africa, born and raised. How I catapulted into the world of media was that I entered the MTV Base Africa VJ search, and they were looking for a new presenter. I had just come of Cape Town as an accounting student, and I didn't win the competition, but I was discovered, and that kind of catapulted me into the television space of things. So now I've made the big leap of faith, obviously wanting to be closer to where the rest of the diaspora is, being on the global stage, and telling a different narrative of where we come from.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you. So I want to start off today's conversation by talking about marketing. Now, it's becoming increasingly difficult for brands to get attention on the internet, which is largely due to every business, big or small, invading the online world, creating an insurmountable amount of noise. Now, influencers have the power to increase brand exposure and obviously boost brand awareness. So what data is it that is most analyzed when it comes to influencer selection? So is the focus more on the performance of a post or on the brand alignment? Now, Elosi, we can start with you. And how do you decide who to work with?
I guess I always start with a couple of things from asking the client, who's your audience? Because you want to know what they look like, what their makeup profile is, because I think you always want to start with, depending on who you're talking to, your influencers really should look like and be in kind of the same life stage as kind of your audience. So I think that's the first thing. I think it's quite natural for people to look at numbers and say, oh my goodness, they've got all of these followers, but you also have to look at engagement. You know, how many likes are they getting per post in relation to the number of followers that they have? You know, how often are they posting? You know, are they getting lots of traction in their stories? So I think engagement is super important. But then again, going kind of back to the client, it really depends on what the client wants to do. Are you looking for just awareness, or people to just, you know, if you're looking for awareness, somebody huge with millions of followers is super important. But if you're looking for something like engagement, you could create a really super engaged platform. I actually love what the Shade Room does by being very targeted and reaching a certain kind of audience. And instead of, you know, going to, you know, they're mass, but they're also targeted at the same way, and making sure that you're reaching an audience that is going to react the way that you want your audience to react. Because if you know, if I'm Nike, but, you know, I'm reaching out to, you know, an old and AARP generation, not saying that they can't, there isn't alignment, but it might be a little bit more difficult. So just making sure the audience, the expectation of what success looks like, and then your influencer kind of aligning with that. And, you know, you don't have to be a million account. You don't have to have 1 million followers to have an engaged, you know, to be attractive to brands. You know, I've worked influencers as little as 5,000 followers, even as little as 1,000 followers. It really depends on what's the authenticity, what's the awareness that they bring to layer onto like the marketing plan that we're putting together.
Right, absolutely. Well, speaking of the Shade Room, Angie, did you want to piggyback off that?
I think she hit the nail on the head. I think that the biggest thing is brand alignment, because as she said, it doesn't matter how engaged the page is. I mean, you know, we work with all types of brands, and some brands just don't align with our audience, and so they'll say, hey, we didn't sell anything. I know that sounds crazy, right? You have an audience of 18.9 million and somebody say we barely sell anything. But that's because they're, you know, if the audience that the people that are buying your product are not like the people that are on that page, it's worthless, right? But it also has some people who have sold 300,000, you know what I mean, off of an ad from the Shade Room. So I think you know, it's really about brand alignment, and then like she said, the second thing is that engagement. And the way that you can see the engagement, or the way that you can test if a page has or an influencer has good engagement, is typically on social media. Engagement should be at least should be around 1%, which is kind of crazy. You know what I mean? But if you see someone getting 3 to 6% engagement on posts, or more than that, then obviously that's a page that's highly engaged, that people are commenting and they're liking, you know what I mean, all those types of things, because that's when the influence is going to be most effective, is the engagement, really. And like you said, I've seen pages that have 100,000 followers that have more engagement than 2 million. So it's really about, you know, here's a site that you can go to look at the engagement of influencers that's helpful. It's called socialblade.com. So if you wanted to, you can research an influencer's name, and you can see how many followers they get a day, how many followers they get a month, their engagement rate, the ranking among other influencers, and all that type of stuff. So I think that's a good resource to use.
Because we do have such a diverse panel, I do have quite a few questions. So if anyone does want to pipe in on that question, otherwise I would want to move on just to get everyone to be able to answer more.
Cool. Can I jump real quick on this one? I think, you know, with so many creators and so many spaces and people feeling it's saturated, there's like one key element that I always try to tell creators that is really important. And we call them creators at TikTok, but influencers, if you will. But I like the creator word because it feels very like artistic. But it's creativity, and brands at TikTok are starting to use TikTok, and the world of, you know, awareness is probably the #1 play you can do on TikTok, given, you know, we're still building out how you convert all of that reach into all the stuff that want sales. But the one thing that cuts through everything every time is like actual creativity, and brands are not doing it on TikTok because it allows their brand to be seen in an interesting, creative way. So like, you know, for example, you could do like a flat lay of I don't know, whether it's makeup or clothes, whatever it is, or you can like apply makeup in a really interesting, creative way that can drive exponentially and more awareness than a flat lay. And like, I would encourage people to really also think about the creativity and not only just like showing the product too.
I love it. Dropping gems. I hope people are taking notes. So moving on, Jackie, as a woman of color who's established and so much success within your industry, I know that you've always been very vocal about there being more than one Black beauty influencer. So how does it feel to be treated as though you alone meet the diversity standard for the industry? And what are you doing to ensure that that isn't actually the case?
Being vocal, like behind the scenes as well as in front of the scenes, like I'm always talking about this very issue, and as flattering as it is that a lot of times people want to come to me as like the authority, I'm also not the only person, and like I'm constantly always being reminding people of that. And sometimes it's not just other brands, sometimes it's other influencers, you know, sometimes they'll hit me up and it's like, well, Jackie said it was cool, so like I got clearance from her, and it's like, that's not how this works. Like, I don't represent everyone's opinions. I don't represent all Black women, and I don't want to. I don't want, when I started my platform, obviously I didn't realize it was gonna be what it is now, but I don't do what I do to be recognized personally. Like, what I do is so that other people in my community who look like me can benefit from this as well. And if I'm the only one clearing the checks, then it's not just benefiting my community, it's benefiting me and only me. And that's not good enough for me. Like, I mean, just fine. There have been plenty of opportunities that I've walked away from confidently and comfortably that I've said, I can sit this one out, but could you at least like still look for someone who could, you know, fill that spot or fill that void, and don't just like try to reach out to me and fill a quota, because that's absolutely not going to cut it. And there have for sure been like a couple, one opportunity that I got like about a year ago. So this brand, I'm not going to say the name of the brand, but they had what we would consider like a PR flop, and they did something not that great, like really crappy. They were rightfully dragged for it. I was the one participating in the dragging, so I was not innocent in that at all. And, you know, I basically was just like, I don't know what, I mean, I'm not canceling this brand, but I don't know whatever this is, they're trying it. So, you know, they came back about a year later and they wanted to work with me again. And I was just like, not interested, whatever. And then they kept coming back and they kept coming back and I kept telling them no. I was just like, I'm good. And then finally I was just like, let me just say something so crazy to where they just stopped hitting me up. And I basically was like, okay, well, if you want me to do this campaign, you have to hire 3 other Black influencers and I have to pick them all and you have to pay all of them. And then literally like 2 minutes later, after my manager sent the text message, they came back and they were like, okay, we'll do it. I was like, oh, I didn't think you was actually gonna do it. So I was like, okay, this is cool. This is something I get used to. Now I'm not always in a position to like be that bold. I'm not there yet, but I mean, I'm trying to. And so that was like one particular instance I could think of where it was like, it's not just about how this benefits me, like how can other people eat out of this opportunity?
I love that. I love that. So Nomzamo, I'm interested for you growing up in South Africa, how different was your experience when you first started out in the industry?
I mean, starting out in the industry, it was a little bit different in that we didn't have that much commerciality, I would say, if there's any term of that nature. But, you know, brands were starting to kind of pick up on Africa and see, can we use African faces to represent our brands? Is there any sort of commercial viability? Are the products going to sell? I mean, I remember I was made the first face of Neutrogena on the African continent in 2015. We're actually celebrating 5 years this year, but in 2015, and that was almost unheard of for a brand that huge to go into the market and say, okay, we're going to find a local face. Because here's the thing, it's one thing for me to see a Gabriella Union, who is a woman of color, right? She's a Black woman, to represent a skincare brand. But it's another thing for a South African girl to feel like a girl who is burning under the African sun, who has almost the same skin problems as me, right, can be able to say, we can trust this brand, right? So those kinds of things as well. I mean, I wanted to also add in the other points that the ladies made is that, you know, authenticity and being intentional about the voice that you put out there goes such a long way. You know, I've seen certain paid posts and I swipe right through because I'm like, that's not you. It's a copy and paste. Sometimes there's even errors in the caption. And that's when you know that, okay, they took it straight from the email. So for me, it was always just from the very beginning. And you look at, you know, another brand that I work with, which is Puma. I'm the only girl, again, at the Puma stead on the continent. You know, again, we don't want to be just the only people. It's to show. So when we go in, we work really hard in being an authentic voice so that when the ROIs, beyond just social media, you know, likes and comments, because here's the thing, are people actually going into the stores and buying? Because if they're not, that means you don't have, right? So you constantly want to show that when I'm traveling, when I'm sitting in my hotel, when I'm in Europe, when I'm in America, I'm still wearing the same brand, I'm still using the same brand on my skin. So it's just about making sure that when we do things really, really well, it not only gives us that authenticity, but also it validates that, you know, the continent itself has a lot of buying power, a lot. I mean, you look at champagne. Apparently champagne sales are the highest in Africa.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, okay, for the rest of you then, within industries, have you ever felt like you faced being boxed out by other people of color because you were fighting for the same spot? And what do you do now to ensure that the rooms that you're in have more faces that look like you? I'll throw that one out there.
I'll take this one. I've never felt overtly as if someone was trying, especially someone from another race was trying to kind of box me out. I think I've also been lucky to work for a lot of Black brands, Afropunk, Essence, even working at a news organization like Mike that, you know, strives for diversity. I think I struggle more with kind of being the only Black person in the room when, you know, having to be kind of upfront and having to be very candid about, one, I don't speak for the entire, you know, whether it be women, Black women, big, whatever the audience that you're looking for. And then two, I mean, I feel that, you know, the work always kind of speaks for itself, not saying that there isn't like discrimination, not saying that there isn't bias, because it is there and it's prevalent. But I feel like I've always been able to be rooted in good work And I'm my father's daughter, so I'm kind of brolic about the good work. And if I think that if you can, if you're smart, you see kind of through that, you kind of see through kind of, oh, but she's Black, she's big, she's this, she's that, but she's really smart and she knows what she's talking about. And if you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't. I think a lot of people, especially in media, on the non-creator side, almost have to build a very thick skin of your worth and knowing kind of what your unique value proposition and what it is you bring to the table. So that you can speak up. So because, just because you're at the table doesn't mean that you feel that you have a right to speak. Doesn't mean that you even feel comfortable to speak. Doesn't mean that when you speak, people are going to champion you. So I think it's about just being inquisitive, being an easy person to work with as much as you can without compromising your values and doing really dope work. At least for me. I'll speak for myself.
Yeah, Nomzamo, go ahead.
I'd like to add, I remember I was shooting a campaign a while ago, and a white woman felt the need to touch my hair. I don't know why, but that moment, but it was almost like, oh, the texture of the hair, I don't think it should look this way. And I remember just looking at one of my managers and my heart just sank. My heart just sank. And I said, I don't care how much money has been put into shooting any of this. I will walk off the set. I will walk off the set if she feels like she can do anything of this nature to me or any other girl in the future. Now, had I not kept quiet, right? Because sometimes we have to be the scapegoats, okay? Because we have to fear the rejection, never working with this company or whatever the reason may be. But we're like, okay, if I keep quiet, it's something that can happen continuously. This person will think that it's okay to do something like this. So sometimes we have to sacrifice and be the scapegoats, but it's about saying, no, that's not how we do things.
Absolutely.
That's not how it's supposed to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Rekik, I know you just recently visited Ethiopia for the first time this year. So considering your heritage, do you feel an obligation to incorporate your culture in the content that you create?
That's a really good question. As far as I could think back, never felt like I was required or obligated to make my culture like in the forefront of what I was creating. But the times that it was incorporated in the content I created, it's because my culture is within me. Like, I am Ethiopian. I am proud to be Ethiopian. I have a lot of pride in my culture. I love my culture. And if I'm being authentic, like Nomzamo mentioned, authenticity, when I'm being authentic in the content I'm creating, by default, my culture will shine through. I mean, my @name is Dope Ethiopian. By default, when you come to my page, whether it's a selfie of me under the sun, you're gonna see my @name first. You're going to have to read my @name. My flag is in my bio. So it's not that I feel obligated to, it's that I'm just proud of where my family comes from. And I'm happy to share that.
I love that. So Angie, then with you, do you feel like because you're Nigerian, you have to represent Africa on the Shade Room? Because I know it is represented a lot, or is that just something that organically happens just because Africans are dope?
Well, I have to represent Africans, specifically Nigerians, on the Shade Room because they're the second largest group that follows the Shade Room. So that's what people don't know. Nigerians follow the Shade Room tough. Lagos is our second biggest city that follows the Shade Room, right? So I have to represent them, but also, it may be that Nigerians follow the Shade Room heavily because I did represent them early on, because I wanted to show my culture. We're Nigerians, so Nigerians are extremely proud. Okay, you talk about proud, we're proud, and so when something big was happening, or something important, or an artist in Nigeria was doing really, really well, we would put them on the page, or Independence Day, we would go hard for Nigerians and things like that. But for me, it's a little bit of a whenever I represent Nigeria on the page, I notice a little bit of backlash because I am a Nigerian woman who is owning one of the largest Black media platforms in the world. And so I know that a lot of ADOS, and if you don't know what ADOS is, it's basically it's foundational Africans who were here, African Americans who were here because of slavery. And so there is a bit of controversy with that because some people don't really feel like I should be able to run this platform, especially coming after MTO, who was ran by someone from Africa. You get what I'm saying? And so it's something that I try to balance for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. And Jackie, with you, what's your perspective on that? As far as like, I know you are a very proud Nigerian.
We are always loud and very proud. You know, a lot of like what Rekik had said, it just comes naturally to me. I don't feel pressured to represent where I come from, both sides, you know, being raised here in America with a African-American mom and then having an immigrant dad. I don't really feel, it just comes, I guess maybe because I do it naturally anyway. I do get a lot of times pressure to talk about things that maybe I don't have the most education on. So that's kind of where I have to draw the line, because I do feel as a woman, as a Black woman, first and foremost, like sometimes being consumed by the media that we see and the tragedies that we see, it can be very overwhelming. And I'm very clear, like, I don't want to talk about everything all the time. It's draining, and it's not good for my mental health. It's not good for my sanity. And so I have to draw the line there, but I don't really feel any pressure or any like obligation to like rep where I come from, because like that's gonna come naturally anyway. Look at my flag is in my bio too, so it's like you already know what time it is when you get there. Like it's naturally.
Okay, I love that. Now, Kudzi, I know that TikTok is growing rapidly in Africa after adopting a strategy to encourage local content creators on the content platform. So what does the influencer industry look like over there, and why is it so important for TikTok to take over this African market?
Yeah, so I mean, TikTok is a global company. I work mostly with the US and some international regions. So I'm not like the most plugged into TikTok Africa, but I do know kind of what's happening in general, at least on the TikTok side. And, you know, the mission of the platform is inspire creativity and bring joy. And it sounds like a really like simple like theory, but actually from an app tech product point of view, you can create from so many entry points, whether it's a hashtag or a filter or a sound. It's actually built to literally inspire creativity in like the easiest way. And Africans, I think we're naturally creative, naturally community connected. That's what the app does by default. We're culturally storytelling all together around trends and a lot of things from the tech side. So I think there's just a natural fit. And what I've found from like watching a lot of creators from the continent at large actually is like really fun local trends. There's all the celebrities, but there's also influencers, there's also artists, there's also the dancers. And it's such a natural fit for the app to grow. And what's really cool is that with, you know, smartphone penetration increasing, data costs decreasing, it's such an easy way for people to create. So it's just like a wide market there, right? It's like an actual low barrier to creation. So it's been really exciting to see, at least from the business tech point of view. And then I think we're also just, I don't know, Africans, in my mind, we are the genesis of all trends. I know it's intense, but it's true. And they, you know, they travel throughout the world, and they take different formations, and they, you know, some get massive and people don't credit them, but that's a different story. So I think it's also just great for me to see something that I've worked on so much in the US really take hold at home as well.
I love that. That's an awesome perspective. Thank you. Elosi, now, earlier, you're the former vice president of sales and marketing at Afropunk and a veteran marketer for legacy publications like Essence and a host of global brand clients. Now, several influencers have spoken out about racial exclusion. So I want to ask you, how can businesses and brands be more intentionally inclusive when choosing influencer partners?
I think it's from kind of both sides. So from like a publisher side, like, you know, when I was working at Time Inc., for example, I brought all the knowledge of having worked at Essence. So, you know, when we would have, you know, beauty campaigns or, you know, home campaigns, to really kind of be aggressive about suggesting diversity within who they're recommending and why. And, you know, because, you know, media kind of looks the same. So I think people's natural inclination is to pick people who look and feel like them without, you know, without making themselves uncomfortable. So I think, you know, from a publisher side, making sure you have the right people in the room and not just there to be a part of your coloring book, but who have a voice at the table, who actually can say something, who can bring recommendations to the table, and not just a person at the table, maybe multiple people at the table. again, because just because you're at the table doesn't mean necessarily that you feel comfortable to speak up. I think from a brand perspective, so if if I'm Apple, if I'm Nike, I think you have to be very intentional in being you have to, I mean, I hate to be as brutal to say this, but you almost have to, Gen Z and millennials are over white, straight, able-bodied. They've seen it for all of their lives. They're over it. So if you are not thinking in that direction, you're already kind of behind. People are over it. You're already seeing, on Netflix and beauty campaigns where people are decentering this kind of like white gaze. So I think brands have to be very intentional about being inclusive, and not just, again, for, a token, but really like, who is this person? Why does this person, if I'm L'Oreal, why does Jackie Aina make the most sense? Because she's engaged, because she reaches a millennial and Gen Z audience. Like, you have to know exactly who it is that you're reaching, be very intentional, as opposed to just kind of leaning into what's always comfortable. I find it still to be a struggle. I don't think media is diverse at all. So one of the reasons I left. It's also one of the reasons why my company is kind of dedicated to building a pipeline. It's not a 5-year program, it's not a 10-year program. It's probably something I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life, to get people like me to feel not only confident, to get the skills, but to feel confident so they can be at those tables. Because the other issue, sorry to continue my rant, is that once you get to these tables, you realize to quote Michelle, to kind of quote Michelle Obama, you get to the table and you realize the lights are really dim here. And so you have to feel, I think if a lot of people knew who was actually at the table when they got there, they would feel more comfortable, bringing their plate to the buffet, because it's not that great. And you really already, as Africans, to echo what Kudzi said, we're the most innovative. We can make something out of nothing. We already have it. I think what we're missing is confidence. I think, white supremacy globally affects us from having that confidence. And then, I think COVID-19 has also put us in a place to where the gatekeepers aren't as strong as you think they are. So this is actually a perfect time to kick down the door and kind of do your own thing. So, end of my rant.
I love it. It does perfectly lead me into something I did want to touch on about the COVID-19 pandemic, and what impact has this had on partnerships and content creations, and what might the long-term impact be? So Rekik, for example, as a content creator, has this pandemic provided you more opportunities, or what effect has it had?
So from like the business side of me working under that marketing company, I was on a project at that time. We were going across the states, and I lost that due to COVID. But as far as my own creating, I feel like I haven't been hindered in any way. I feel like this has actually offered more opportunity, because brands are looking, I mean, they know we're home, so they know we have access to our emails, and now is the best time to actually make those connections, make those real personal connections with those brands, and have those opportunities to create content at this time. But I have to say, for me, what COVID has done on my personal side of actually delivering that content, it's been tough for me mentally, because in order for me to create, sometimes I have to be in a good mental space, and I'm in front of a camera sometimes, and I don't want to come to my audience when I know I'm not okay, because I know my energy is transmitting through the content I'm producing. I'm intentional about that. So that has been difficult for me, but I'm doing good now, and I'm answering those emails. So keep the bags coming.
I love that. Okay, that's perfect.
I want to speak on that question, because what I've noticed just from having a media, because I know a lot of people are quite wondering, but for media companies that do content, you can almost say this is the best. This time has enhanced, has pushed our businesses forward, because everybody's at home.
I think you're frozen, Angie. Or is that on my side?
Yeah.
You guys can see her? Oh, she is frozen. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll definitely get back to her point when she comes back on. I did want to ask Nomzamo, you have said in life is to leave your generation better than you found it. And when I heard that, I absolutely fell in love with that phrase. And I believe that we should all absolutely live by that mentality. Now, do you think that one way to do that is to bridge the gap between Africans from the continent and the diaspora community? And how can we use media and influencer platforms to accomplish that goal?
I think it's so important, you know, in the beginning I said, we're past changing the narrative, right? We need to control the narrative. Because for as long as we constantly want to, okay, I'm changing it, time is moving, right? So I do a lot of work on the African continent as a UN refugee agency, Goodwill ambassador. So I go into refugee camps and I do a lot of humanitarian aid. And one of the things that I don't particularly do is showcase my people in the light that media, traditional media in the past has always done, which is the little girl with the fly on the face. I portray my people as a people that is strong, that is resilient, right? Because I understand that I have a platform, and therefore with the platform comes many people, and with many people, there's a greater responsibility in what I put out, right? And I think it's one of the main conversations that we need to have beyond just influencers. You know, media is so careless sometimes. And it's the most frustrating thing that we could work really hard in calling the narrative that this is who we are as a people, this is what Africa stands for, and then you get media and they tarnish that entire thing, right? So there's such a greater responsibility for us to just be responsible in the voice that we put out, right? So for me, in leaving the better than I found it is that when I came in, right, we had the heroes of the past. You know, one of my favorite quotes from Jomo Kenyatta, who says, you know, we can tell the children of the heroes of the past, but it's up to us to make ourselves the architects of the future, right? And what does the future look like? It looks like us bridging the gap and saying that we don't just aim to be competitors of each other, because unfortunately that's what the diaspora and us African people tend to do. We lean towards competing against each other instead of collaborating, sadly.
That is sad.
So those are some of the things that, you know, I work really hard at, in that we don't just leave it at the likes and the subscribing, but we go past that and saying, you know, what do you do, Rekik? What do you do, Jackie? Right? How do we best collaborate so that the more, you know, it's just a much more forward-thinking way of doing things.
I'd like to add to that. I you know, it might be a super basic, you know, distilling of it, but you know, I do think that we have to start bridging the gap between the African diaspora and the continent. I think one of the benefits that I had from being at Afropunk last year was understanding the how we're all connected by almost kind of how white supremacy is kind of stepping on all of our necks, but also the beauty is also, it's like looking at a kaleidoscope and seeing that you turn it a little bit, oh, this is how, you know, a French person who lives in Paris experiences their Blackness. This is how a Black person in Atlanta experiences their Blackness, and seeing that actually the thread of white supremacy, we're actually experiencing globally kind of the same things. It just expresses itself differently based on kind of where we are. So I do think that that's super important. I think, you know, what lots of folks have said about, you know, creating content that shifts, you know, how we think of the dark continent and how we think of Africa, and demystifying what we think of Africa and Africans. You know, I was actually mentioning to two friends of mine earlier, actually in the group chat, that, you know, I feel very emotional when my friends come up to me and they send me their 23andMe results and they're like, Elosi, I'm 46% Nigerian. I'm like, let's just get the jollof rice. Let's make it happen. You know, I think that's super important, because I do think as Africans, we don't understand that we do have a cosmic privilege of kind of being connected to the continent already. And we don't know what it's like to not have that root. Even more than most Nigerians, you could trace my family back to 10th century, which is a privilege most people don't have. And we have to realize that and be very empathetic in the way that, you know, some people don't know how to talk about Africa, you know, think about Africa. And I think, you know, when I was growing up, I'm sure, Angie, you're from LA, you know, what African booty scratcher, you know, I love that African print is popping now, because it was not popping when I showed up in my 6th grade outfit. They weren't feeling that. So I feel like, you know, if we're able to bridge the gap between Africans in the diaspora, that's Africans in Europe, Africans on the continent, Africans in the Caribbean, Africans in America, we'll have more collective power to fight against white supremacy and kind of see where they all kind of affect us.
That's so
And just one addition there, and this is not a TikTok ad, but I think one of the powers of technology is that you can actually like now co-create, right? Like if you look at Don't Rush, right? Which, you know, the Don't Rush challenge, and everyone was making the video, passing, and then transforming. I remember watching Jackie, Dima, who lives in Nigeria, and I'm like, this, like, actually, if you think about it a couple years ago, this would be really hard to do without technology. That wasn't done on TikTok, but you can also do that stuff on any platform. And one thing that we can do is actually reach out to people, and I tell people this all the time, like, I'm not saying spam people's DMs, but like actually reach out and connect. I think we have this thing where we feel like we just can like ask someone to like say hello or connect or like ask advice or like how do I do that? How do I do XYZ? That's number one. To co-create, like actually use the technology, because when you do that, you can actually like own a trend and like push a whole narrative, and like then people can like see the story and like creative content, whatever that may be. And the last thing that I always think is important for to bridge the gap is putting people on. That's my motto. Like, put someone on when you can put someone on. So like I have the privilege of like working with some media companies, and when we're doing interviews, like, you know, we can show a diverse array of people, but I can also pick the person who I know is like the creator from South Sudan, whose parents came to and now live in LA. Like, this is the person that we should show. So whenever we have those opportunities, it's like making sure we're like cross-pollinating and like helping people be seen. Otherwise, they will just never be chosen.
Yeah.
I love that. Yes, Nomzamo, go ahead.
Also, information and just having the tough dialogues. You look at episodes that are part of Black AF Flicks. There was a particular episode where, you know, there was an African family, and that kind of, you know, there was a huge conversation around that and how the family was being portrayed, or the conversation around that was being portrayed. I remember with Spike Lee as well in She's Gotta Have It. There was a whole, you know, I think, episode or scene where they were talking about, you know, Black British actors and how Black British actors are coming to America and taking everybody's jobs, right? And then there was a whole thing about butchering the African names. Cool, fantastic, you know, it's content, right? And we're watching, cool. But I think it's important for us to have those tough conversations where those who have the knowledge, we have to educate. And we're not educating from a point of tearing somebody down, because the sad thing about ignorance is that some people just don't know any better. So we use those opportunities to bridge the gap by educating and having the conversations that no, Africa is not a country like the United States of America. We are not separated by states. We are separated by countries, right? So I think it's important for us to have those conversations.
There's one thing I want to add, because I've seen the chat room going off, and I've seen a lot of people ask this question, but it was about how do we as Black platforms kind of push open the door in a white, industry. And I think for me, one thing that I learned was that when I first, Black media is not really respected. You guys hear me? Freeze again. You hear me? Okay. Black media and Black creators are not respected. When you think about who's getting the big deals, you know what I mean? Like, they will discount us in those deals all the time. And so just kind of like Tyler Perry said, you kind of have to build your own table, because the majority of the money that we get from advertisement comes from Black companies. We had no choice. It was hard for us to sell the Shade Room to Dove. You know what I mean? Even though our audience is one of the most valuable audiences in the world. I mean, a buying power of $1 trillion. Come on now, like, you know what I mean? Over $1 trillion at this point. And so, instead of continuously going into those doors, getting shut in my face, we decided to build an ecosystem or kind of like a platform where the Black media is feeding Black companies, and Black companies are feeding Black media. You know what I'm saying? And so that's kind of how we are. So I would say build your own table. And the power of our community is so great that we can build our own table and we can actually be successful. And so I think work with the people who look like you. As a Black media company, when we post a Black company, they get more sales than a white company would, because the people, Black people, support their own companies. Like, you know what I mean? They want to support Black-owned companies. This is what they want to do. And so I would say just create a system outside of that system.
I love that. Well, Angie, I was actually going to ask you because there's no doubt that you have absolutely mastered the world of social media, because the Shade Room is actually Instagram's third most actively engaged account. So I was going to ask you, what's the most important factor when building such a strong brand? Would that be it, to collaborate with people that look like you?
No, I think the most important factor is community. So from the, I read a story about Airbnb and how they got so big. I know that when they first started, they started knocking on the doors of the people that were putting their houses on their site. Ask them directly, so what do you want me to do for you? What can we do for you to make this experience better? And so I think that for me, what we've done from the very beginning was we talked to our followers, the people that, the roommates. First of all, we created a community, we named them, we gave them agency by naming them, you know what I mean? Now they feel empowered. And we talk to them consistently. That's how we get our news. So we're constantly asking them, well, what do you want us to do? What do you, so the most important thing is building a relationship with each, with people. Like, if you have 100, build a relationship with all of them, because they're going to be the ones that are going to push your brand forward, that are going to be loyal to the end because they knew you from day one, you know what I mean? And they are the ones who are going to make you engage. They're the ones that are going to be commenting, liking. And so I would say you have to focus on community, and the more, and everybody always says this, like, the more niche you are with your community, the more successful you will be. So if you have a brand that's for everyone, then nobody can really connect to you on a deeper level. But if you have a brand for a specific type of people, you know what I mean? Whether it's African American, my brand is primarily African American women, right? Whether it's African American women or whether it's whatever it is, the more niche you are with your audience, and the more specific you are, the better, I think, the more success you would have as far as engagement and building a strong.
Okay, I love that. So if I could open that up to everyone else, what do you think are the most pertinent factors when building and establishing your brand?
That, I feel like it's in my mouth. I think when establishing your brand, I think there's a couple of things. Well, one, what's your product? Do you know what you're selling and how it's different from something, and like, what's your unique value proposition? I think two, knowing who your audience is, like, who am I talking to? How am I going to talk to them? And then I think a lot of people kind of have an idea, but they don't know how to take it to the next step. I think the next step is really creating a home on the internet, creating a website, creating an Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I think those are the big three, but of course, spread out. I love TikTok, so I will say create a TikTok, but that's Elosi personally. And really start to create, what's my brand? Who am I talking to? How do I have a unique value proposition in the marketplace? And really, I think when you do that work, it allows you kind of weed out, like, okay, I may be this, but I'm not that. I like this, but I like that. My audience is this, but they're not that. And it's not a one-time activity. It's something, if you're a good brand, you're always learning, like, oh, damn. I had a blog for Black. And when I was looking at the analytics, I'm like, there's a lot of guys visiting this page. I was not creating content for them. So now that I have that information, is there a piece of content, not to shift my entire strategy, but to let that audience know, I see you, I'm speaking to you, and there's a way to increase that audience. So that's.
Can I jump in on that as well? You guys can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I feel like with me specifically, I think what resonated the most with my audience is not only what I am in my platform, but also what I am not. And I'm very vocal about what I'm not. And I draw a line in the sand, and I'm like, this is what I will accept, and this is what I will not accept. And I also think one big, really, something that really also relates to me as well, as far as building my brand, is the conversations that I was having on my platform were not widely accepted. And so when people literally told me, I've been subscribed to you since 2009, there's a reason why they have connected to my videos that long, because it wasn't about just hopping on, in the age of Fenty when diversity became cool. It was no, I was doing the work way before there was any money to be made from it. And I think that is the easiest thing that people can identify with me, is I was having the conversations that people didn't want to have at the time. And yes, there were absolutely other Black creators that were doing the same. It wasn't just me, but unfortunately they just weren't, reaching, their videos just weren't getting the eyes on them that they really should have. So I also think it's standing in, knowing like this may not be very popular, but like I'm just going to do it anyway. And like whether or not I make a ton of money from it, okay. If I do make a ton of money for it, that's cool too. But like one thing that I'm pretty adamant about to anyone that always asks me like, how do you start a channel? How did you become so? It's honestly because I was doing the work before there was any money to be made. And not only that, but we're talking like well over half a decade of not even making fairly livable money on social media. So, and a lot of people would not be willing to do that. And I wouldn't either, but it was just kind of like circumstantial. Like it was like, well, I like empowering people who look like me. So I could have done that through YouTube. I could have done that through Instagram. I could have done that anywhere. YouTube was just the vehicle that made me, you know, the most recognizable at the time. But it was absolutely not for profit. It was just like I was going to do that anyway.
Yeah, that definitely ties back to the authenticity, because when if you're doing it with no benefit from it, then that's how you know it's authentic.
Yeah, and this is, I guess, is more in a sense like personal brand, since I work with a lot of creators. And Jackie actually said this at a beauty event a long time ago, and she was giving I think it was a talk on like how she's built her career, and she said always remember your why, right? Like why are you actually doing this? And I actually talked to a lot of creators about this. So sometimes people would be like, I want to be a fashion creator and then my own thing. And I'm like, well, you don't show up like that. Like I'm seeing you doing all these dance trends, which is fun, it's cool, but like you actually need to show up in the way that you want to be seen. And two, if you are doing the fashion stuff, like are you actually in unique selling point? It's been a really practical example is don't be a clone. And I say this sometimes. I do like really heart-to-heart conversations with creators. Like, don't be a clone. No one needs like the millionth fashion account. Like, they just don't. There's people who've done that have millions of followers. They could, but like, why is yours different? Otherwise, you just won't cut through. And a really good example. And also make sure you are a real person. Like it must actually be like, even a brand must feel like a person. It must actually talk to you as a real. That's what Gen Z likes, at least. Brands to be like people. And then. So, like a good example, I don't know if you guys know Tabitha Brown from TikTok. She does like the vegan motivation.
Vegan?
She grew like 2 million. She joined like 2 months ago. She's 2 million followers, and now she's like on Vogue and on the Ellen Show account and all this cool stuff. But it looks, and she was an actress, but she's really like a motivator. So it looks like vegan cooking, but it's delivered from like motivation and advice and care. And like that's how you cut through, because no one needs another vegan cooking account. They actually need like a real person connecting with them. That's how you build like a true creative.
Now, I saw a question here in the chat that said, how can we support content creators on the continent? So I'm not sure, Nomzamo, if you want to speak from the perspective of you were just living on the continent before you moved to Los Angeles. So how is it that we can help them?
Whew. I mean, I think it would be a crime if I answered that question, because I wouldn't particularly call myself a content creator, but there are brilliant content creators on the continent that have grown and literally blown up and continue to work with different brands. I think most importantly, just use Google. You know, find out top 10 African content creators. Go onto their YouTube, engage, comment. I think that's also quite a big thing in the YouTube and the influencer and content creator world. I would probably say, but definitely just engagement and to see what's the language, right? Because when you get the language, you get to understand the world as well. So I'd probably say that.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to just touch on to our content creators, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've actually had to overcome? So I'm not sure, Rekik or Jackie, if you want to start us off.
Oh, that's hard. I mean, there's like 50 million. Like, how much time do we really have? I think that, and also like my personal experiences have somewhat changed. So when I was first a content creator, like within the first like 5 years, it was like, oh, you can't say Black. Like, what about our mainstream audience? We don't want to offend anyone. We don't want to shy anyone away. So I had to tackle that. I had to tackle things like trying to find a manager, trying to find an agent, without them like being like, okay, so like, what kind of content do you do? How does it apply? It was basically the same thing that I was mentioning earlier. It was like people didn't really know what to do with content creators like myself and are really niche specific audiences. Like to them, that was like something that they would run away from when I first started. So I had a really hard time getting opportunities. I had a really hard time getting even things like PR because sometimes the stuff that they would send me did not match my complexion, and my channel is about beauty. So a lot of what people see, like it's gotta look, you ain't that colorblind, like you gotta be able to see what I look like. So I dealt with that challenge. I would say now it's probably just filling the quota, and like I'm trying to like tackle tackle this idea of like you have to like not just want to work with me now. Like I'm not the only Black influencer. I'm not the only African influencer. Like it would just, all of the work that I've done would just be a waste of time if you still think that like just because I'm not available for an opportunity that you shouldn't go forth and try to find someone else. So I would say it's kind of that. And also like I'm still, even though we have come such a long way in beauty, beauty specifically on social media, I'm still kind of a minority. And like that, you know, still bothers me. Like even from the position that I'm at, I mean, I have 3.4 million followers on my YouTube channel, but I can name with probably maybe two hands all of the other women who look like me in beauty specifically that are at the same volume or, you know, or higher. It's like, I mean, how many white YouTubers can you name with over 1 million followers? Like probably hundreds in beauty. But, you know, even still today, we're still definitely a minority. And I will never stop like making noise about, and that a challenge that I still run into today.
Okay, so I know that we are going to close up. I'm sorry, did someone say? Oh, no. Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up. So I want to just close out by asking everyone in the interest of highlighting people on the continent, what is your or influencer that's on the continent or internationally part of the diaspora community? So Elosi, you want to start?
Like I have so many. All right, I'll try. I mean, Jackie's here. Jackie is one of my
Or you can
faves.
give like a top three.
Jackie.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
Jackie, I love. There's this woman young woman on Twitter. Her name is The Oddity. She's just a ball of light on Twitter. So I just love her, just light. And there's another woman. Her name, I keep calling woman. Young woman person. Her name is Elsa, and she's based out of Kenya, but for some reason she's blowing up in South Africa, and she is hilarious. And I mean, there's just so much talent coming from music. There's just music. There's food. Naija Foodie. If y'all want to be ready for marriage, Naija Foodie, that is your girl. That's it. That's all I've got.
Okay, Kudzi? Or Angie?
I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but Jackie, I watch every YouTube video, like Jackie. And she doesn't sing the theme song sometimes. I'm like, where's the song? But anyway, and then I would say there's so many because I watch literally 500 videos a day and like hours of YouTube every day just because I got to be in the mix. But I would pick one that would be Coconut Cows from South Africa. She's a friend, but
Yes.
she was a friend long ago. Now she's blowing up and thriving and flourishing. So I'm excited for her. She does like satire, touching on politics and race and like how it impacts us today. And she's just phenomenally smart and creative and dope.
Awesome, thank you. Angie?
So Jackie, definitely gotta mention Jackie. I love her videos. And then I'll also say Dulo. I am Dulo. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's very funny. He's a friend of mine. And I would say her name escapes me. But he did Skinny Girl in Transit. It was one of my favorite series. I don't know if you guys have heard of that series. It's on YouTube. It's called Skinny Girl in Transit. Please watch it because you're gonna be hooked. Start from season 1 and you'll be hooked.
I'm gonna look it up. Nomzamo?
I would definitely say Coconut Hills as well. She is immensely funny and super, super smart. I am Dulo. And in terms of people who are like futuristic and just speak about the continent and just have dope content, Trevor Stearman on Instagram. And I think he's really awesome.
Awesome. Rekik?
I think a lot of mine are like also branded in a way. So there's like Abisha networks, which it's like these platforms that allow opportunity, right? So like that's like what I'm really adamant on following and staying up to date with. Oh my God, there's another where I got this crew neck from that says Africa is not a country, from Malachi Apparel. Pacau, he owns Mazizi. So yeah, those are some of my favorites, the ones that are actually representing and paving a way. Yeah,
I love that. Jackie?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't have more than one. I have dozens, but off the top of my head, I probably think of one of my favorite creators is actually a fellow Nigerian, Dima Ume, and she is in Nigeria, and she just creates some beautiful premium content. She's a beauty influencer, and she also runs a blog, and like her stuff just always is on point. Like every time I see her pictures, I'm like, I just want to go back to Nigeria. She always makes me miss home. She really, really does. As far as like some of like the OGs, like, I mean, we got to shout out Peak Mill. Like Peak Mill has been slaying wigs for years. I don't know if you guys know of her, but like seriously, she wrote she was doing Invisible Lace, but before we even knew what that was. Okay, like, I mean, credit to her, and she's, like I said, also Nigerian. I feel like my favorite creators also depend on the platform. I love Bonang on Instagram. She always looks so good, and she's South African, right? South African, yes. That's what I thought. Yeah, I mean, Patricia Bright, fellow Nigerian, based out of the UK. And I also really, really like Ohima Bonsu. She's Ghanaian, and I believe she's based here in the US, but camera quality, incredible, like content, insane artwork, beautiful. Like she creates these beautiful looks. So those are just the couple.
I love that. Okay, I saw someone say in the chat we need a list of these, so I re-listen to this and write up that list. But thank you guys so much for joining us. This panel was absolutely incredible to moderate. You guys are all doing amazing in your respective industries. I wish you all the very best moving forward. And to everyone that's in the chat that's viewing, please head over to the main stage. We have a huge surprise for you guys there. So thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.